Hello folks, and welcome to our game here on this Monday afternoon with myself, Shane Stapleton, and as ever joined by Michael Verney. Huge weekend of club action has just happened, but there's lots of stories also at the inter-county level. We're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Don't forget, you can use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. There's a huge range of jerseys, zip-up tops, the whole lot. Maybe you'd want this lovely Wexford jersey. Maybe you're like a Kilcoo Crokes fan and you wouldn't mind wearing this at the next outing, whether it's hurling or football. Michael, how's tricks? I believe you were playing a bit of Gaelic football over the weekend. Back to your first love.
Trying to, Shane. We were down at Bad Sign. One of my colleague in the Independent, Donegal Boyle, was on to me. Are you over 35 a couple of weeks ago? Unfortunately, I'd say yes. It's the first time anybody's ever asked me if it was over 35. We went down and played the Tommy Griffin tournament last Saturday. Beaten by a pint in our two games, but there was plenty of pints drank after. I put it to that even pints in my waddy.
And how did you go?
Not too bad, yeah. All right, yeah. We actually drove down that morning, so we left Borough at 5:45, and we were down in Dingle at 9 o'clock. Even managed to get in a quick little hike before we went to play the first match. But the finest, yeah. It was good old crack. We were beaten by Ganiga Villa by a pint in the first round, and then the Stacks beat us in the Shield. And then, as is my luck at the moment, the Stacks went on and, of course, won the Shield after. So you could say our form worked out well, but you could also say that we left another title behind us.
I presume you got injured, no?
No, amazingly not. And you know what the key to it is, Shane? I don't train anymore. I don't train collectively anymore, and that seems to be the key. I do my own little bits. Saying that, like, I'll probably get struck down tomorrow. I'll probably put my hamstring going out to cook the breakfast or something tomorrow. You never know.
So look, one of the big stories of the weekend was this brawl that happened between Naomh Baroque and Aunert the Bala, and you know, even what's happened at the sideline, you can see fists flying there. There's another angle where you can see somebody getting a hurley and swinging in the midst of it as well. So obviously unbelievably unsavoury scenes. You see people looking to get involved as well. I think some went down, Maria, hold me back, I swear I'm coming, and they're not actually doing anything. But there's no getting away from it. It is nasty scenes. But I see a lot of people saying, throw the book at them and, you know, typical GA and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, look, I mean, this does happen. We've covered it a few times before. It happens way too often. But it's very hard to see how you're going to somehow come up with a set of rules or something that's going to get rid of this, because there are thousands upon thousands of games going on across the country in the space of a week. And now and again, people will step out of line because it happens in real life too. I'm sure some people have seen videos in recent times. I saw one of more or less war breaking out in the middle of Longford town there, a video a while back. There's another boxing match going on in Terrace just off Liberty Square the other day as well. We're seeing this in society. Some people are just going to lose the plot no matter what. And it's not like you can send huge security to every club ground in the country or county ground in the case of Parnell Park. Sometimes it's going to spill over because you have people who just don't know how to behave yourself. And I think it's very difficult to just slate the GA. Like, if the evidence is there and you can throw the book at or prosecute people or whatever, I'm sure it'll happen. But it's not like it can be legislated for and you can always prevent something like this.
No, they're not buying into this typical GA. Anybody that says that is not your typical GA supporter. I can tell you that. And they're probably from potentially a rival sport. But obviously it does happen. It's not typical GA. It's not typical. It doesn't happen every weekend or anything like that. Far from it. The video from the other side of the pitch is actually even more damning, I'd say, because you can see what looks like a lady swinging a hurl like it's a machete almost 3 or 4 times. Just really bad. It's funny, Shane, we talk about these incidents and we say, I've often said, you know, make sure there's an exclusion zone or have people behind a certain point. But sometimes when things happen, it doesn't matter. You have to look in really closely. I think it's into the left of the picture in the stand, in the second or third row maybe. Looks like there's a hurl swing in there, which is just not good at all. No point in saying any different. But like, here we have, this is a county ground where, you know, everybody should be in the stand, but it doesn't seem to matter. When certain things happen, some people will take it upon themselves to try and get involved in it and be in the mix. And there's a couple of subs there involved with one of the teams that definitely didn't cover themselves in any glory at all either. I wonder how easy or difficult it will be to identify people. In this case, the video footage is fine, but you know, you're not going to be able to categorically maybe identify someone. I'm not sure what will come of it. I just saw some quotes from Pat Eaton, obviously, who's running for GA president, but he's Leinster GA chairman until the end of this year, and he just said there's any amount of sanctions available. There are very severe sanctions which can be imposed, and if necessary, which will be imposed. We play 100, but he also said on the flip side of that, we play hundreds of games every weekend in a spirit of enjoyment for both players and spectators. And unfortunately, we get isolated incidents which are rightly highlighted in the media and elsewhere because they have no place in our games. We must deal with them in as harsh a manner as we can, but also in a fair manner. And I think that's kind of pointing to this been taken in context of itself and not of other things that are going on in other counties or anything like that, and that the people involved here should get what they deserve. I'm not sure how much will come of it, because I'm not sure how easy or difficult it is going to be to identify people. Like, how does it, like in the referee's report, like how do they describe what was going on in the stands? Or does the referee even see what was going on in the stands? And I'm not sure with regards to the referee's report as well, whether they can get assistance from linesmen, umpires, to identify people outside of that and to include them in the report.
They even struggle when there's a mass brawl of players only to even identify who are the guilty parties? If we go back to Meath, Mayo 1996, it's like when you've got a brawl of that scale, then trying to take into account what's going on in the crowd of people you've never seen before in your life, you know, how are you supposed to keep track?
It's very, very difficult to keep track. And like, imagine in games like, you know, that school game that happened a couple of weeks ago, where there was no linesman. I don't think there was any umpires, like, as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's a very, very difficult one. I'm sure there will be sanctions, but it's funny, Shane, it happens an awful lot where you hear about the incident and the incident is blown up and it's talked about and a probe has been launched. And a lot of the time, until very, very recently, you don't hear the results of the probe. And it might have been a ban handed out, but you'd hear very, very little about it. But I imagine because this was quite high profile, middle of the Saturday afternoon, got a lot of traction online. People have obviously commented on it now as well, and high profile people like Pat Eaton there. So I'd imagine this will be made public, or the results will be made public. But just real unsavoury scenes that no one wants to see.
Yeah, and I don't know if some people saw at the end of the coverage of the Glenullen game. Who were Glenullen playing again? They were playing against Galway Pierces, so a Derry Tyrone game.
This is a bit different now.
Yeah, I know this was different, very different. But at the end of the game, you know, players and supporters and whatever were on the pitch, but there was a few kids, and you can see at the end where the stream is ending, you can see the graphics are up on the screen of the scoreline, and then you've got a few kids behind from the two rival teams. And ultimately, they look like they're 10 or 11. I mean, it's hard to tell because the camera's back a good bit, but they seem very young. And you end up seeing a flying drop kick from one kid on one side to another, and it's just kind of kicking off. But again, what do you do about that? What's the reason for that happening? Who are given the bad examples here, if anyone at all? Like, can you even blame a parent? Like, I mean, in some ways you can say, yeah, but then it's easy to be, you know, looking on from the sideline and say, geez, that's bad parenting there. Like, I mean, sometimes kids will completely act out, you know, despite what a parent will want them to do. And then one other thing is, you look at the FAI Cup final over the weekend, there was also supporters kicking off there as well. So again, I just think this is a reflection of society in some ways. Obviously, some sports have a bigger issue than others, but sometimes these things are going to happen in society, and you will see them. Like, and I'd say it's not about drug problems or alcoholism or anything like that as well. When you see it in sports, sometimes it's just a reflection of what's going on in society. But not everybody wants to hear that. They want to hear about, you know, how that, you know, we need to put a law so this doesn't happen. It's about individual responsibility as far as I'm concerned. And unfortunately, you just can't legislate for all of these examples. Just
on the two young fellas, the first thing that came to my mind was Khabib climbing over the cage and throwing the flying drop kick at John Kavanagh's backroom team or whatever in that UFC fight. And I suppose that kind of thing, maybe not that it's been normalized right like that, but sometimes I suppose when aspiring athletes see, you know, some of their heroes or real legendary figures doing things like that, maybe it you know, leads them to think that it's cool or it's okay to do something like that. It was kind of, when I saw it first, I was kind of like, kind of thinking it was funny. And then I was looking at it again, I was thinking it's absolutely mad. Like, you just chopped the legs off the young fella. And they're obviously from rival clubs as well. It's a bit of a mad one.
Yeah, and sure, like, obviously that Gur here as well, Conor McGregor, he's done any amount of things as well, throwing chairs through buses, the whole lot.
Well, just on that, Shane, that's again someone that probably a lot more people maybe looked up to him then than now. But like, if your heroes are doing things like that, you potentially grow up and think it's acceptable to do that. I remember doing a GA Q&A at the time with 5 or 6 really high profile hurlers, and it's about, I'm going to say it was 2017, and I asked them who their sporting hero was, and they all said McGregor at the time, and it was like 17. He hadn't really done anything, and then like you know, if you ask someone now or even a couple of years ago, like, his name wouldn't even be mentioned, just because like he's no longer a hero to anybody, you know, to a lot of people who are somewhat sane. Do you know what I mean? You might find him funny and humorous at times, but some of the stuff he does is absolutely bonkers, and, you know, an awful example to any aspiring athlete or any kid growing up or any adult even.
His name has been dirt around my house for a long, long time at this stage. But anyway, we'll move on to a slightly different topic. William Coleman had messaged me about this. Well, Shane, absolutely love the show with yourself and Verney. The level of coverage and knowledge is second to none. I'd love if you could discuss something which you touch on quite a bit on the show, and that's All Ireland and provincial club gradings. I think there's a very easy fix which would appease egos in each county and give us proper teams from each county in each provincial. Simply call the championships the Munster Senior A Hurling Championship, Munster Senior B, Munster Senior C. That way, the intermediate teams in Tip don't get their nose out of joint. They can be called what they want in Tip, but go into the third T, i.e. the Munster Senior C Championship. So Laura, for example, could have played in Munster this year without the uproar of being called junior in Tip. What do you think of that, Michael?
Yeah, I think it makes some sense. Listen, it is all over the place. It's kind of open season really at the moment. Like, as I said to you, Offaly have been really competitive since we changed our structures, and now no longer the Offaly junior champions would no longer go into Leinster now, because that's taken by senior B and intermediate. So we're way more competitive in that. But then you go to other counties and it's, you know, the 33rd team that's playing in the, you know, the 33rd team that's potentially going into representing a senior B championship or an intermediate championship, and they're miles behind Kerry, where it could be the 9th team or whatever. I think that proposal makes an awful lot of sense, and it's, I suppose you're going into a similar grade as you're coming out of, and it's a lot less messy, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's something in that, William. And if other people want to get their comments in and let us know what they think, go ahead and let us know what that. Cash is King doesn't actually agree. He said there's no need to change any of that, William. Much bigger problems in the G8 than that. But
I don't think that's
an easy fix.
Yeah, I don't think that's to say, like, there might be much bigger problems, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be fixed or whatever, you know?
Yeah, because you can have a congress and there can be 100 things on the floor. So, you know, there's no reason to necessarily dismiss it. Emerald 90 says All Ireland club finals should be played on Saturdays. I mean, it depends on what day Paddy's Day is, but I'm sure plenty of people would like to simply have the games on a Saturday so that they can enjoy their Sunday. I know there's plenty of people who probably feel that. Richard Hogan, is the video clear enough to even identify individuals? That's going back to what happened at Parnell Park. Probably not. John S., lads, I'm no fan of Oulart whatsoever, but as a Wexford supporter, I can tell you in my lifetime, I've never seen or played or seen them involved in something like that. And I suppose most people outside of Dublin wouldn't have seen anything with Naomh Barrow, good, bad or indifferent, really, because, you know, this isn't meant in an insulting way, but they're not the most high-profile club. I think I've played against them maybe once or twice over the years in a league match, maybe in a senior B match towards the end as well. And I can't say I remember anything particular happening there as well. Maybe it is just one of those days where things got out of hand. This was a game that went to penalties, which Naomh Barrow won by 3 goals to 2. There was plenty of penalties over the weekend and extra time and all that, which adds to the drama. Enniskillen Gales had a penalty win. Carrigan of Antrim had a penalty win. I do find it kind of brilliant. But you were talking the other day about, you know, Oulart going from Leinster senior champions in December 2015 to now could they go on an All-Ireland club run at intermediate level, you know, after being relegated last year. I think this is going to be a real shock to the system for them, because they were playing as the second-tier champions in Wexford against the senior 3 champions in Tipperary. I mean, I think that's definitely something that will hurt them.
Well, it's like this, Shane. They're going up senior now, and they're bulling, I'd imagine. They're bulling now, and the winter will be probably a bit of a winter discontent after this. Fair enough. They achieved their primary goal, maybe you could say, of winning Wexford and getting back up senior. But this is, they really ended up with a bit, and this is not doing any disrespect to Nave Baroque, but like a team who contested an All-Ireland club semi-final against Napiershig in 2016 and were very unlucky not to win it and could have won it in normal time. And now they're beaten by a team operating in, as you say, in Dublin 3. It's a disaster for them. Some people have made it, talked about the gap. Obviously, Ferns had that same gap and they were playing Mullins's yesterday. They both had a similar gap. Mullins has actually had a week extra. Maybe they're not doing, the hurling teams any favour there. Maybe the split season players love the split season, maybe within the county, but whoever represents them in Leinster has been done maybe a disservice as a result of that gap. So I'm not sure. See, it's a kind of a funny one. If a lot of players are happy with the split season, but I think they want an alternate split season, as in football 1 year, first 1 year, and then hurling first the next year. But all the club players have been well looked after, I would say, in that respect. But the team who goes on to represent Wexford at senior, intermediate, and junior, they have struggled they have really struggled since it was brought in. There's no point in saying any different. And it's a very, very difficult break to overcome, because your attentions is, I know Oulart wouldn't be a big football stronghold, but your attention is not on hurling for a long period.
Yeah, especially not really competitive games where you have to be on top of your game or there's an edge. Richard Hogan says, feel pretty embarrassed after those games at the weekend. Was big enough Danesford and Oulart and both beaten at the weekend. So Trim, we'll be talking about a little bit later on, they went down to Nolan Park and beat Danesford. Michael Barron says, Ross Gray will walk the All-Ireland Intermediate. Get on the 3-1, Mako. And Daniel Kennedy says, sure, Mullins had no issue. That was obviously with the long break. Neither did Ballygunner, for example, as well. Might sound disingenuous to borrow a quote from Verney, obviously, but when Oulart were the only team to lose in the underdogs this year, the signs weren't good. That's ML89 there. So, yeah, there might even be something in that.
Nisha wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, well, look, maybe Nisha was just on fire in that game. Joe, what we wanted to talk about was this interview that is coming out now with Cristiano Ronaldo and Piers Morgan. I don't know if you've watched Verney, but the couple of clips it's going to be a 90-minute interview, but a couple of clips that have come out, geez, it has been fairly earth-shattering stuff, and it made me think, what exactly is the most earth-shattering interview we've seen in GAA? And there's a couple of people replied on Twitter to us a little bit earlier on, and I'll check those out and bring them up on screen. But did anything come to mind to you straight away?
From a GAA point of view, not as much. Like it's not something where, there's not usually this big expose or something. You're not running to go on Oprah Winfrey, or do you know what I mean? It's not the outlet maybe isn't there as much in the GAA. And I was just chatting you off here. I couldn't find too many, but the one that Paddy O'Shea obviously did about the Kerry fans and calling them, animals. And I think it was somewhat not taken out of context, but like wasn't he out of a job? Was he out of a job fairly quickly after those comments? Am I right in saying? I think that was on an all-star tour. But like, how many people have totally backed up what Paddy said since then? Now, there was uproar at the time, but so many people have backed up exactly what he said since, and they are some of the most demanding supporters out there. There's no point in saying any different. But again, Shane, sorry now, while I'm chatting to you, when my colleague in the Independent got his hands on Pat Holmes and Noel Kennelly, and they talked about why they were ousted from Mayo, that caused a stir of stirs. And I put to you, Shane, the best way of describing something like this, the Ronaldo interview will control the narrative. Like, it'll be what everyone will be referring to over the coming weeks, and there will be stories done on the back of it. There'll be stories done about the quotes in the piece, then there'll be stories done on the back of it. Then Eric Ten Hag will have to get comment on the interview, and that's when you know you have an interview that is absolute gold. And it was the same, I remember, with Martin's piece that time. It was the same with Paddy's comments, because you have to get a comment from the Kerry County Board. Supporters are going mad. You're getting comment. You're asking other managers, are your supporters like effing animals? It controls the news stream for a couple of weeks. And like, this is like imagine Ronaldo's. Firstly, imagine his Manchester United teammates, what they're thinking. Imagine his Portuguese teammates. This is all that's going to be talked about probably during the World Cup. Maybe it's been done as some sort of smart aside to take away from the absolute, I don't know what you'd say about the thing even going ahead in Qatar and all the attention around that as well. But it's just, it's a mad one.
Yeah, so Fred91 says the Paddy O'Shea interview. Porter says Babs' donkeys don't win derbies. And then maybe also sheep in a heap. He actually once said about Tipperary, I think after a 2006 league game, that Tip had lost to Galway. They were dead only to wash them. So that was a fairly big one as well. An interview that I was at was the Jim McGuinness post All-Ireland final interview in 2012 when he had a journalist removed. Now, I wasn't initially sure what had happened because I was filing a bit of copy at the time. And then he just went off. So that was definitely one. There's been a lot of stuff over the years. There's something else that crossed my mind, but I can't. Oh yeah, this is one from ML89. Eamon O'Hara calling out Kevin Walsh after being dropped off the Sligo panel on the Sunday game was probably one of the closest to it. And then back to Babs Keaton. Tom Smullen says Babs saying Offaly were like running around like sheep in a heap in 1998.
Just on that, Shane, you had mentioned 98. You've probably forgotten it since, but you mentioned about Gerlach Nan's interview outside. Was it the courthouse or where was
the High
it?
Court? Yeah.
It was because they were trying to get. Were they trying to get an injunction into Colin Lynch's suspension or something like that? Like Jesus, when you look at 98 on paper, how many things happen? Like then you have obviously you have Babs leaving, Bond coming, Gerlach Nan, Lynch getting sent off. The rows between Waterford and Clare, the 3 games between Offaly and Clare, the sit-down protests, and it's just an unbelievable year. Like that must have been like manna from heaven for like a GAA journalist anywhere.
Owen Whelan says was at Parnell Park on Saturday as a Wexford man, but had no alliance to Oulart apart from being a Wexford club. Issue happened because the referee failed to give one of the most blatant frees in injury time of extra time. It happened in front of the Oulart bench and it went off from there. I was at the other end of the stand and didn't see the crowd trouble at the time. It was a very hostile atmosphere all through the game from the Naomh Brogue supporters, so I wasn't surprised. Pitch was a shambles. Seems like there's a bit more to that message, but it hasn't actually.
Just on that, Shane, how many games have you been at where you say, like maybe a referee is letting some things go, but there's a couple of slaps and things that are, they're nasty enough, and you're just thinking there could be war here. It happens in some. It doesn't happen in that many games. You're just thinking if the referee, if he or she doesn't lay down the law here fairly quickly, it could be open season for anything to happen. And the commenter there mentioned the standard of the pitch as well. When things get mucky and messy and lads are kind of sliding around as well, it does kind of lend itself to more of this kind of thing as well. Again, in front of the dugout or in front of the dressing room, that's so much more likely where flashpoints happen, where there's people that are getting particularly excited about it, are particularly excited about a call, or particularly excited about an injustice, and all of a sudden people are too close to what's going to happen. That wouldn't happen in the middle of the pitch. It's less likely to happen in the middle of the pitch, I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, and a lot of bigger grounds, it's less likely. In Parnell Park, you could nearly reach over the wall as a supporter and grab a player if they were, soloing up the sideline. Slight exaggeration there, but it's very, very close. And then you have the 2 benches, which aren't all that far away, especially not when you've got mentors coming out, going up and down. So, that's maybe it's a ground where it's particularly more likely to happen. And also, by the way, we talk about Oulart and having to come up to the belly of the beast in dub play away from home. They have beaten Crokes there in the senior championship with some of the players that are mentioned here by Owen Whelan. I know you're going to look at comment in a second, but just to look at Owen Whelan's one to finish off. On the flip side, the best players for Oulart were Owen Moore, Garrett Sinnott and Roy Jacob. Jacob scored 1-2 coming on as a sub. Sinnott scored and kept Oulart in it, and Moore hurled an amount of ball, all lads over 36.
Yeah, there's just some other comments in there as well. Richie Fitzsimon's actually from my own club in Burridge. So Johnny Pilkin interview an Independent after Babs called him sheep. It led to his removal. I think that was on the Monday. Was it Liam Horn rang him and Johnny, as is his wont, said what was on his head, and that's ended up what happened. And it's amazing. There's probably been more than we thought of initially. Just the Babs one here as well. Babs saying Register was dropped for putting too much butter on his spuds. Just like in fairness to Babs, like from our point of view, absolute gold he gave us and continues to give us. With his quotes, like donkeys don't win derbies is still quoted to this day, as is the sheep in a heap.
Yeah, and Richie Fitzsimons, who commented there, he was referee in the Kilmacud Crokes against Balacla game yesterday. So Johnny Pilkington interview with Ger Canning before the All-Ireland final. So we've got Vinny Sheedy on Twitter saying Gerald Nan on Clare FM in 98, Don Corleone and the Three Priests. So there's just so many unbelievable interviews over the years. So whether you're watching live or later on, put the comments up and let us know. And if there's any particularly good ones, we'll do our best to bring them up in the next show. What about Adrian O'Brien?
Just on this one, Shane, Johnny Pilkington hates this. He's like, still to this day, 28 years later, he cringes every time he hears it. So basically, Ger Canning went down to Burghcastle to interview Johnny the week before the All-Ireland final in '94, and he'd interviewed Gary Kirby as well. And he asked Gary Kirby what would it mean to win All-Ireland, and Gary was just talking about what it would mean to the people in Limerick and what it would mean to the next generation. And he asked Johnny, and Johnny like just kind of started laughing, and he's just like, what would it mean? He's like, mean a hell of a lot of drinking, Ger. And it's just like that literally has followed Johnny around to this day and will follow him around for the next 30 or 40 years at least.
It's iconic stuff. I know he probably regrets it, but still absolutely iconic stuff. We'll move on to the next part, which is Adrian O'Brien has been snapped up by the Clare hurlers. So the Kilmallock man is currently coaching, he's had to stand down from both St. Finbarrs of Cork and Ballier of Clare, and he's been snapped up by the Clare hurlers. Now, maybe this happened several weeks ago, and it's just word of it is coming out now, but he must have seriously impressed Brian Lohan if he's looking at it and he's seen St. Finbarrs and Ballier getting this far. Maybe even word has filtered back from the likes of Paul Flanagan, Tony Kelly, and so on. They're counting, because you'd imagine that would be the case. A lot of the time in the GAA, it is word of mouth, but that's a great step for him, and it seems fairly warranted given how well his teams are doing.
Yeah, and even that, he's worked with Limerick under Billy Lee for the last couple of years, and look at physically how they've stepped up to the mark from Division 4 to Division 3 to Division 2. So yeah, it's a great move. I think he lost Mike Carmody was their strength and conditioning man. I think they lost him, so they've replaced him with a fairly good guy. And as you say there, a lot of it is word of mouth, and a lot of it is like Billy Lee stepped down, so he's had a bit of a loose end. You have a small window there to snap up a guy, particularly these really, really good guys, and they've obviously taken it here. And he'll still be going on. He's guaranteed a Munster final place no matter who wins. So he'll be going on, and probably might miss maybe a bit at the start of Clare's training. Either that or he's double jobbing with the two at the moment. But they've definitely gotten a good man there. And yeah, he's a Limerick man. It's amazing. James Moore and his coach as well. That'll be two Limerick lads, say, heavily involved in the Clare setup. It's amazing the crossover of guys there. Canucks obviously from Limerick. He's with Limerick now, but helped Clare win All-Ireland. Alan Cunningham is Clare, and he's helping Limerick absolutely thrive at the moment as well. So the crossover of bodies there is always big.
Yeah. So New York are going to enter the Connacht Hurling League next year, and all the games are going to take place in Bacon, which is the Air Dome, NUIG, Connacht GAA. So that's going to start in early January. They're managed by Kerry native Richie Hartnett, and they had their first training session at Gaelic Park on October 17th last, and they're hoping to use it as a stepping stone towards the Laurie Maher Cup. Johnny Glynn is expected to miss the tournament through injury, and the other counties taking part are defending champions Roscommon, Sligo, Leitrim, and a Galway development squad. So we obviously have a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of should we do our club power rankings now, or should we cover a couple of the senior games first?
I'd say go through a few of the games first, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, we are going to do a club hurling power rankings, but look, you were at Ballyhale Shamrocks beating Castletown Gagan 5-25 to 15 points. What was the story of the game? What players stood out?
Yeah, nearly everybody from a Ballyhale side, to be honest with you. Obviously, word filtered through beforehand that TJ wasn't going to play. He had a small bit of a muscle strain. By all accounts, if they were in trouble or anything, they could have brought him on. But that's what Pat Hoban said after. And he did. I actually saw him doing the warm up, and he looked like he was moving fine. It was obviously just a bit of a precaution. It's a very luxurious position to be in, to be able to rest someone of his ilk and still win a game by 25 points. Owen Cody deputised on the freeze and was good on the freeze. But Colin Fennelly kind of ran the show from full forward. Adrian Mullen started in the wing, went out midfield, ran the show as well. Richie Reid got an awful lot of ball wing back. It's just Castletown were kind of in the game in the first 15 minutes. It was 1-5 after Colin Fennelly kicked the goal, but they'd 9 first half wide. I think they dropped 4 balls into the goalkeeper's hands any chance they had in the game. It's amazing how you know, if you take some of those scores, you're kind of in the game, saps a bit of confidence from you. Ballyhale at the other end, they were like so clinical in front of goal. Owen Cody had a goal chance, saved. Niall Shortall kind of bundled it into net. All of a sudden, they're up by 10 at half time. Castletown came out, were decent in the first 10 minutes, and then Ballyhale get 2 goals within 60 seconds, Fenley and Owen Cody, and then they just power on. They ran the bench, they brought on 5 players, 3 of which the 2 Barons I wouldn't have heard much of, and Dara Mason, who I presume is Dean's younger brother, got to run the bench, and were still able to, you know, come home 25 points to the good, which just shows you the strength and depth that they had. It's funny, one of the best players on the field was definitely a Castletown man, though. Jack Gallagher, corner forward, like really diminutive little player. Must be only about 5'3" or 5'4", but Ballyhale couldn't handle him. And he was on Brian Butler, who probably had a foot on him and probably about 5 stone, I'd say. And Jack Gallagher was just so dangerous. He was bobbing and weaving, got 5 great scores, battled to the end. But realistically, like, there's just the gulf in class here. Ballyhale were only in 3rd gear, I'd have to say. Like, they didn't even have to go out of 3rd gear, and they still came home by 25 points. Ominous signs, I would say, for the rest.
Yeah, and I was chatting to one of the Ballyhale players at the All-Stars, and I was saying, look, being honest, I think you're an unbelievable team to watch and full of class. But, you know, I said in the county final, the village team you played against were lacking that bit of class. And I know Castletown Gagan obviously have a couple of really good players, in Niall O'Brien and Jack Gallagher. But, I mean, the step up, the difference in class with Ballyhale versus, well, most of the teams in Leinster, really. We'll see how. I mean, you're expecting them to beat Naas. You know, I don't think anyone would think we're talking down on Naas by saying that Ballyhale are going to win that game. And there's part of you thinking maybe it could get ugly. No, we could end up being really, really wrong, and Naas could really drive it into me. Obviously, we don't know that for sure. But Ballyhale have beaten Mullins before in Leinster finals. They've obviously won a couple of All-Irelands before losing the final last year. And then you've also got Kilmacud Crokes, who at this point, they're still in the championship, but have a bit to do to be fully proven at provincial and obviously All-Ireland level as well. But, I mean, there's some difference in terms of, like, Ballyhale's route back to Croke Park versus, for example, Ballygunners. I mean, you're going through a championship in Kilkenny, which they seem to be winning routinely at this point. They have the odd hiccup here and there, but they're winning it fairly routinely. And then they're coming into the championship and they're going to play the Westmeath champions, Castletown Gagan. Good team, but obviously not up to their level. Then you're going to play the Kildare champions, Naas, and then you're going to play the winners of the Dublin Championship versus the winners of the Kildare Carlow Championship. Now, they're all good teams in their own right, but there's a fair difference between what Ballygunner are going to have to do, which is beat Killarwan. Obviously, they didn't give their greatest performance because it was only a week out from, you know, their own Tipperary Championship. They were missing lads, the whole lot. But to beat a Tipperary champion, then you have to go and play the Limerick champions, who are going to be in the Piershik. Then you're going to have to play either Tony Kelly or the Cahalans before you get to an All-Ireland semi-final. I mean, there's something wrong about that. And I often talk about how it's so easy for a Galway team to be parachuted straight into an All-Ireland semi-final. The imbalance there, you know, I mean, if Ballyhale had to go and win an All-Ireland, were they to beat Ballygunner and then the Piershik, you know, that makes it that bit tougher. And that's essentially what Ballygunner are going to have to do.
Yeah, listen, the path does look very clear for them at the moment, and Pat Owen wasn't really wasn't really shying away from the fact that he's really looking forward to seeing Ballygunner and the Piershik next weekend. Obviously without taking their eyes off the prize, and they've another 2 games before that's an All-Ireland semi-final as well, Shane. That's going to be probably either, we're obviously going a few steps ahead, but Ballyhale against either Ballygunner or the Piershik or Ballya or Finbars. So that would be an absolute belter of an All-Ireland club semi-final. But they're head and shoulders above everything in Kenny, and they're head and shoulders above everything in Leinster at the moment. And they just look seriously motivated. And I just asked Pat about, like, coming in, like you mentioned before, how they've won the 5 in a row, but they've won it with 3 different managers, which is unheard of, really. Like, and he just mentioned about, like, what was the most important thing that he felt he had to bring to it, and he just talked about freshness. He just said, we're obviously new to this, but we really felt that a big part of our gig was to make sure that the lads stayed fresh and stayed enjoying it, because they're on their long road and they're always fearful that can they keep going to the well. We've done that. We've kept players fresh and interested, and we've tried to use the panel as well and keep things driving on. But look, this game is over now, and it's all about the next one. He definitely has kept them fresh anyway, him and Jimmy Marr and Niall Lacey. and they look like they're absolutely mad for action and mad for road. And obviously a lot of the Kilkenny lads were away on that team holiday in Thailand and didn't really show any ill effects of that either. I believe they were back on the Monday, which is kind of a bit of a statement as well. It's not coming back on the Friday or a couple of days beforehand. It's showing teams the respect that they deserve. But from a Castletown Gagan point of view, Shane, I have to say now, you would be disappointed. I know they had 9 wides in the first half and 4 balls dropped short. But like after, making a 4-time lucky in Westmeath, like they have a lot of good players like Salim Vardy, Niall O'Brien, Angus Clark, and obviously Jack Gallagher was brilliant. But like it was a bit and they brought a big crowd with them, but it was a bit of a no-show at times, and Ballyhale were walking through them. Now, I put it to you this way, it was a Castletown Gagan team that couldn't probably get up to the pitch of it, and it was a Ballyhale team that were treating this almost like an All-Ireland final. Like Colin Fennelly looks like a man possessed at the moment. Like his hurling is even improved. And I asked kind of Pat, just mentioned about Colin, like what's different about him this year. And he just said they've worked an awful lot on his aerobic fitness. They know how powerful he is, but he seems to be even way more dynamic now. And like there was a ball thrown in around him after 2 or 3 minutes. I think the goal came from it. And he'd no right. It was an 80-20 ball to defenders. And like to put it plainly, he just stuck his arse back in and made an absolute nuisance of himself. And a goal came off it. And I think he was involved in the 5 goals, I think, and setting up 2 of them. But he just looks so hungry at the moment, as do all the other lads. And just a word, I know they were only playing, they were playing Castletown Gagan yesterday in the one handy, but Dara Corcoran to me looks like a man tailor-made to play wing back at inter-county level, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if him and David Blanchfield were to nail down potentially the 2 wing back spots either next year or the year after. But he's such a big, strong, physical player as well, and drives forward at every opportunity. And just the last thing on Ballyhale, they've actually evolved so much. They play the ball around beautifully. Like again, to say it in the nice way possible, they make an idiot out of you. Like they're playing the ball over your head. Like it's like Richie Reid got a ball at one stage yesterday, and there was a Castletown Gagan man about 20 yards away from him, and a Ballyhale man maybe 5 yards behind him, and he just plays this inch perfect ball into, I think it was Ronan Corcoran, into his stride. Like they're pinging the ball around like Limerick at times as well. Like they're beautiful to watch.
It's not, I mean, in a way, Ballygunner are doing something similar, not the exact same, but these really top-level club teams now are just playing the ball around beautifully. Richard Hogan, in a word now, what was the pitch like at Nolan Park?
It was okay from afar, and then when it held up okay. When I went down on it, it has gotten a lot of traffic, and they tried to keep the supporters off it. And I was chatting to one of the stewards after. Once a couple of adults come down on the pitch to talk to a few of the players, all the kids just come down, and yeah, there's a decent bit of damage done when you get down on pitch level, and some tracks actually on the far stand side. It held up okay, but like yesterday was a gorgeous day. Like we have. Like the weather at the moment is like, we were chatting to Stefan Ockenbar about climate change. Like I'd be seriously worried about us having weather like this in the middle of November, because
we're going to pay for it in February and March and April. I bet you it's going to be horrendously long winter after all of that. That sometimes happens. But like I was going to say that Parnell Park, same job again. Now it would have had plenty of matches recently. I think there was even an under-14 match either in the morning or the day before. Obviously not ideal, so the pitch wasn't perfect. And I'm not blaming the groundsman. I'm just saying it's, when there's that much traffic at this time of the year, it's going to be hard. But what a difference it's going to be when the teams play in Croke Park. I mean, Naas, I don't think you could possibly pick a worse place to have to take on Ballyhale Shamrocks in the Leinster semi-final. At the other side, but I think both St. Mullins and Kilmacud Crokes will be delighted to get a game at Croke Park. Now, some of the Naas players with the footballers, Brian Byrne and James Burke, they have played at Croke Park a few times. And then there's other lads who will obviously have played there for Kildare. And then obviously
All Ireland there as well, though, Shane. Yeah,
I was just going to say, and that's before you even factor in the All Ireland. So there is that, but it's a fair step up. But anyway, we'll have more to talk about with that. I was at the Kilmacud. Well, actually, we'll first off talk about St. Mullins beating Fern St. Aidan's 119 to 117. This is it's a huge victory. The key moment came at the start of the fourth quarter when James Doyle passed to Conor Keogh. The midfielder had it all to do, and he did enough to beat James Lawler in the goal. So obviously a goal towards the end of the game is going to be a huge difference maker here. And Mullins are back on the road again. As you kind of mentioned, it's been so long since they were in action, all the way back in the middle of August. What a huge relief to get over the line here. Now, I saw some people acting as if this was a bit of a surprise result. I was kind of expecting this result.
No, I would have been too, Shane. If you look at it as well, when the Raps won last year, they were beaten well by Balacla in Portlaoise, off a break as well. Mullins obviously were in a Leinster final as recently as 3 years ago. So like they're a good side, and the likes of Jack Kavanagh, Marty Kavanagh, like you've a lot of like real good inter-county players there. So and on home soil. So it wouldn't have been a surprise now to me, I have to say. Mullins will come on for the run, as you say, 14 weeks since their last competitive game. They'll be sore enough today and tomorrow, I'd say, but they should be primed for Croke Park. And they're kind of a mobile side as well, so I reckon Croke Park will suit them too. And again, there's a great opportunity there on both sides there for Mullins and Crokes. Yeah, Ballyhale are going to be waiting in a final, but a massive opportunity to play potentially 2 games in Croke Park.
Yeah, for sure. And then I was at Parnell Park, as I'd mentioned already. We'll come back to that in a second. I'll go through a few comments, and then maybe you can quiz me on the Crokes Balacla. I have the team sheet there and the whole lot. But James Daly says, Jesus, lads, Ballyhale winning by 25 points without the goat TJ Reid, of course. Incredible team. Looks like Leinster's a foregone conclusion already. They're like the Stone Cold Steve Austin, just destroying everyone in their path. And then obviously banging a couple of beers together at the end of it. Is the Leinster Club Hurling Championship like a mini version of the Leinster Football Championship? If you took Ballyhale out of it, it'd be a very good championship, just like taking Dublin out of Leinster. Ballygunner and Pearse, you only have to worry each other in Munster as well, so that's not a big difference really. I don't necessarily think that's true, because Ballyhale have won it recently, and I'm very interested to see how the bars go with the 3 Cahalans there, with the likes of Ethan Toomey as well. I don't think that Ballyea are going into that game thinking that they have it in the bag already. Definitely not. Richard Hogan, they'll probably fancy getting back to Croke Park. Ballyhale won that county title against Tullaroan. Naas won't be a pushover for the Shamrocks. Would expect them to give a game for 50 minutes. Ballyhale would happily play Ballygunner now if they could. Looks like this order: Ballyhale, Ballygunner, and Pearse against St. Thomas's. We will do that in a couple of minutes, that power rankings. Shamrocks managed to break well. Jimmy Maher is an excellent coach. Rhinas nearly did Ballyhale last year, to be fair to them. Ballyhale without Reid as well, incredible team. County final next weekend, so hoping it's all right. Marty Kavanagh on his way back too. Left hand on top, Tom Mullally is a shrewd operator. He's obviously the manager of Naas. It'll be interesting to see how Naas go. I thought Kilkenny would have got Tom in at some point. Right, so ask me about Crokes against Clock Balacla.
Well, I thought this would be tighter, Shane, I have to say. Firstly, can I ask you, in the early even exchanges of the game, did you think there was a different edge to Crokes maybe that wasn't there last year? Did they look like they were on a bit of a revenge mission? Were they the ones getting in the hits, getting in the flicks, getting in the tackles maybe the Clock were getting in last year?
No,
Really?
They weren't. I thought Crokes were good from the start, but like Clock Balacla got ahead early on, and they were looking good, and I think they were 5-2 and maybe 6-3 ahead. They were looking good, and then all of a sudden there was a real burst where Crokes got a couple of goals in the space of, I think it was 2 goals in about a minute. The first coming from Brendan Scanlon, who wasn't initially named to start, but he started there. I had him with the freshers last year. Unfortunately, he was injured for a lot of it. And then the second goal came a little while later from Oisin O'Rourke after a brilliant burn and run from Brian Hayes, I think he was a county minor hurler just a couple of years ago. But once or twice he made burn and runs up through the centre, and you could really see that he's added something. Because when you've lads who can run off the shoulder and create those line breaks and so on and so forth, to use rugby parlance, that's absolutely huge. On the other side, I would have said that a huge disappointment for Clock Balacla was getting a red card to Brian Corby during that, just during that same run of the game, midway through the second half. I'm not sure the exact time of the sending off, but it was midway through the first half. And when he got sent off, it kind of took the air out of Clock a little bit. Now, it didn't stop them in terms of trying, but the fact that they scored 112, having started off with 6 points in maybe the first quarter of the game, give or take, that'll tell you that it took a lot out of them. And Crokes took over for long spells. And I think it was a brilliant hook from Tom Delaney, who initially started centre forward and then had to go wing back after the red card. He did a brilliant hook on Keno Kahasik, who had soloed forward from wing back for Crokes. And that probably just kept Clock in the game for a little bit longer. Then second half, to be fair to Clock, they kept going. They got a few scores on the board. Stephen Bergen got a nice goal. But to be fair to Crokes, it was one of those things where it was just a composed performance. And they just kept popping over the scores. And Fergal Whiteley came up with a few. Dara Purcell did. Oisin O'Rourke, he scored one from play, 65, and I think it's 9 frees as well. And players that really I thought were very good towards the end of the game. Mark Rogan, the centre back. These are all young players as well. Keno Kohasik started pulling a few balls out of the sky, and Brian Hayes, as I kind of mentioned already, and even the fullback Dara Butler, he won a lot of ball as well out in front. And they managed to shut down both Picky Maher and Willie Dunphy. And when you're doing that, the two main men in that forward line, look, you're going to go a long way towards winning, aren't you?
No, without a doubt, yeah. Like I said to you on Thursday, if they can shut down one of them, they'll have a great chance. Shutting down two of them, and you're really taking away. Like Willie Dunphy ended up at 1-5 in the county final. Picky chipped in a good few scores. So like, if you take that threat, one of those threats away, you have a good chance. If you take away two, you have a great chance, and you're probably going to kind of coast home. And it seemed like they did. Was it just I was watching it obviously from afar. Like, was it bad in discipline from a clock point of view? You don't like to see, ending with 13 or that type of thing, because it's probably a problem maybe that Laois and even Offaly have had at county level in relatively recent years.
Well, you see the Brian Corby one midway through the first half, and by the way, I think Richard Hogan is asking when the goals came. It was around the 18th minute, give or take, something like that. I had heard people say that they heard a crack or saw a hurley being drawn, and Dara Purcell ended up on the ground, but I didn't see it myself, and I don't think there's going to be any footage. But he looked fairly disappointed walking off, but didn't really seem to be criticising too much. I think it was one of the umpires who called it. The one for Willie Dunphy at the end of the game was, I think it was a second yellow card, but maybe it was a straight red, because as the referee was coming over, he turned and he walked towards the sideline. So he looked to know what was coming anyway. They were gone at that stage. It was 218 to 112 for a finish. There was no doubt over who was winning the game. But something I'd say about this is, I think Crokes, they've had a few forays into Leinster, and it hasn't happened for them at this stage. To win a game against a seasoned operator like Clonmel Balacla, who obviously got to a Leinster final last year, I think further belief that's going to do an awful lot. And they'll see Mullins, rightly or wrongly, well, to be fair, I see it as a 50-50-ish game. They'll see that as a winnable game. They know they have a lot of pace in the team. The only thing is, Davy Crow, I should say, who's playing midfield, he seemed to go off with a bit of an injury towards the end of the game, so that's a bit of a blow. But hopefully he'll be right. But they also have Alex Considine to come back, and he obviously started for Dublin in some of their championship games this past year. He was suspended for this game. So that'll give you an idea that there's more to come. And just one other thing to point out is that Bill O'Carroll, he started this game. Now, we haven't seen him start so much for Crokes in the last while, even though he was playing with Dublin maybe as recently as, 4 or 5 years ago. And I'd say he's only early 30s, but he didn't start the game. Got himself a yellow card, and, he is liable to throw in an old wild tackle now and again. I'm sure you won't mind me saying. But they took him off at half-time because they obviously wanted to ensure that they kept the man advantage. And in came Rob O'Loughlin, who's a very experienced player for them as well. And he did really well and won a few balls. And you know what? I'd say he's laid down a fair old marker in terms of starting the next day. But there's a lot to like about this team. And just they'll give a right rattle against St. Mullins, I'd imagine.
Considine was suspended from last year's Leinster campaign, was he?
No. I think didn't he get red carded against Nafina late on?
Sorry, you're right. He did. Yeah, you're right. He did. Last thing I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of new names there, like Mark Rogan and a few of these guys that wouldn't be nationally known or anything yet. But are there any give me 3 or 4 players in particular, maybe that Micheál Donoghue might be looking at and thinking, yeah, this is definitely something I really want to work with or try and polish over the next couple of years? Yeah,
I mean, I'm surprised that we haven't seen Grogan in with. Maybe he has been in with the county panel. At times lads can be in and out, and you're not actually entirely sure. He was captain of Crokes just a couple of years ago. I think he was only 18 or 19, but he was quite good in this game. I think Keno Kohasik is somebody, the way he plucked ball out of the sky late on, I thought that was quite impressive. Brian Hayes, his pace burning up through the middle. Davy Crow and Dara Purcell, they're both only about 19, but they both have a lot of quality. So I'd say they'll be lads that Micheál Donoghue might be looking at. Now, remains to be seen, but those are the kind of guys. And then maybe Eddie Gibbons could be in there as a backup to Sean Brennan as well.
Big fan Eddie Gibbons. And I tell you something that I don't know about backup either. He will be pushing for that number 1 spot over the next couple of years, without a doubt. I'm a big fan of his. I remember seeing him
Don't be picking on my boy Sean Brennan.
I remember seeing him in Burr in it was the COVID under-20 championship. And he obviously really good keeper, good distribution, lovely slap of a ball for long range frees as well. So listen, competition amongst keepers, and obviously they're going to have to probably go at one, but having that sort of competition between keepers is great. And the last thing I want to say to you, Shane, before we maybe move away from the Leinster Senior Championship, it was mad enough, because I don't know if this has ever happened before, but in the 18th minute yesterday in the Ballyhale game, Ballyhale scored 3 points from play in the 18th minute. So they scored 3 points from play in the 18th minute in the first half. And then in the 48th minute, which is obviously the 18th minute of the second half, again, they scored 3 points from play within that 1 minute. I don't know. Like, I remember it happened in the All-Ireland final this year, but it was 3 points in 1 minute. But it was 2 Kilkenny, 1 Limerick. But it just shows you how hurling has changed in many ways as well. Like that you can actually do that. So they had to probably, maybe we'll just say it, they had to win a puck out, score. The opposition pucked out, they had to win it again, score. Opposition, you know what I mean? Like it's phenomenal, really, and it all happened within 60-second window. It's mad, like hurling, and it's that quick, and it's crazy.
And the other thing is Ronan Hayes, he caused bother in terms of like some of the high ball going in, he was breaking it his way, and Darren Maher had plenty to do back there in full back. But Ronan Hayes might catch fire at Croke Park, so he's one to watch out. The last couple of games, he probably hasn't been as on fire as he could have been, or as we've seen in the past. Just in terms of the scope of where they can go, that'll be an interesting one to watch. Richard Hogan says, thought Alex Considine got 2 yellows in the county final. Paddy Mullen was suspended for yesterday's game, so they carry over from county finals. 10-minute period where 2 goals and a red card was where the game was won. Tough break for Clock. Hard come back from that. Red cards have cost Laois at county and club level in recent years. A couple of quick goals can sway a game, as at this time of the year, Crokes need to keep focused for Mullins. They beat Raharney last year and lost to Clock. Need to get through Leinster. Willie Dunphy is arguably the bigger threat for Clock than Picky. Well, both of them were relatively quiet yesterday, even though they have lots of quality. Will we do our power rankings now?
I'd say go for it.
Sure, if not, why not? Who are you thinking straight in at number 1? So on the list here, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, just for convenience, we have the names of the teams that are left in the Senior Club Championship, and we'll start the list from here where the X and X are.
Well, is there anybody you want to make a case for number 1?
I would say you probably have to go for Ballygunner as number 1, even though they're like, the reason I'd say Ballygunner is because last year they were in their first All-Ireland final at Croke Park, and I would say there was an adjustment for them and the pressure of, can we get over the line? Now they've gotten over the line, I think that will sort of release them to play even better stuff this year. So that's why I'd be going with Ballygunner and number 1.
If Ballygunner play Ballyhale Shamrocks this year, who do you think will win?
I think Ballygunner will win.
Okay, I think Ballyhale.
That's why I put them ahead of them.
I think Ballyhale will win, and I think they're a team on an absolute mission this year. They were the better team in the All-Ireland final last year, despite displaying poor form until that point. They have an absolutely massive point to prove because they feel like they were robbed of a 3 in a row, robbed of an All-Ireland. They look hungrier than ever. They're a much better team than they were last year. They've obviously introduced the likes of Niall Shortall. He was brilliant yesterday, hit 1-2. He's only doing his leaving cert. Killian Corkin came in midfield yesterday, hit 3 points. To me, they're displaying even better form than last year. So I'll argue hard for Ballyhale number 1.
Do you know, the reason that I probably concede ground on this is because of what I said already. The path that Ballygunner have is that bit harder. So that would, I suppose, actually, now that I think about it, I wasn't factoring that in when I just decided to say Ballygunner, but I think Ballyhale are going to have to get number 1 on that basis.
Well, I put you this way, Shane, as well. Like the way you look at it, like Ballygunner could be gone on Sunday at 5 o'clock. Like Ballyhale will. It would take a monumental shock for Ballyhale to be not be still in the competition in a month's time. I put it to you that way. I think they're I personally think they're the better team anyway at the moment, and particularly the fact that I think they have this massive chip on their shoulder as well. Like, and players who were stale last year, the likes of Colin Fennelly, look like they're absolutely hopping off the ground. So yeah, I'd be happy with Ballyhale number 1. Again, listen, from a Ballygunner point of view, I know. Desi Hutchinson said after the county final this year that some people were writing them off and questioning them. So listen, if you want to take this as motivation that we're writing you off, then absolutely no problem whatsoever. But I do think Ballyhale are in a really good position, and as you say, the path to the point of where they meet the Munster champions is a much easier path than for Ballygunner or for Napirshy.
Okay, I'll let you kind of lead out with the next part of it. Who do you think is number 2? So I'll delete them here on the right as we're going along as well.
Well, obviously Thomas's ran Ballyhale to within an inch of their lives in that semi-final last year. And as John McIntyre said to us on the show last week, that was probably Thomas's best performance ever. So they're at a really high pitch, and that was without Shane Cooney as well. So they're in a really good spot, and it looks like they look like they're a team that have a bit of an axe to grind over the coming months as well. I'd probably still have Na Piarsaigh at 3 though. They're All-Ireland champions more recently, obviously, than Thomas's. Last year, they won in 2020, didn't get a chance to go on when they had a pretty full complement to go on and contest in Munster and All-Ireland. Last year, they were beaten, obviously. Mike Casey was out. Peter Casey was out. There was a couple of more injuries along with that as well. Just looking at that Limerick County final, and you're just thinking that they can hurt you in so many ways. Like the likes of David Dempsey and Adrian Breen, who have not really seen any game time with Limerick in recent years. William Henn up top, Kevin Downs, Peter Casey, Will O'Donoghue midfield, Mike Casey fullback, Carl King cornerback. Like they have some riches. I'd have them probably marginally ahead of Thomas's, I would say. But again, one of them's going to be gone out.
Well, that's the thing, like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's the thing. How can we have, let's say, Na Piarsaigh ahead of St. Thomas's if we know that, if we're to assume that Ballygunner will edge past Na Piarsaigh, which we're not sure of at all. But how can we have both of them ahead of St. Thomas's when we know that Thomas's are guaranteed and all? Sorry, assuming to beat Loughrea, whichever Galway champion comes through. How can we have both Ballygunner and Na Piarsaigh ahead of them?
It's funny, Shane. I think Na Piarsaigh are a marginally better team than Thomas's, but like Thomas's, I'd say that Thomas's could be out this Sunday as well. Like they're playing the Galway County final at the weekend too. But you'd imagine Thomas's are not guaranteed, but you'd imagine they're more likely to still be in the championship in a month's time compared to Na Piarsaigh, shall we say. Even if Na Piarsaigh were to get over Ballygunner, they still have a tough Munster final against either the Bards or Ballyea. But I'd be happy, probably happier then in that case to go with Thomas's 3, Na Piarsaigh 4. Because I think it balances it out. I think you're putting a bit of reason and thought into it of who's actually going to be left in a week's time, if you get me.
But if Na Piarsaigh were to meet St. Thomas's, who would you fancy to win the game? Because I think on the basis of teams getting knocked out and so on, we do have to put Thomas's 3rd here if we're going to assume that Ballygunner will beat Na Piarsaigh. Yeah,
I think I wouldn't be assuming Ballygunner would beat Na Piarsaigh either, but just because they're reigning All-Ireland champions, they're showing no signs of any drop-off whatsoever. You would have them as marginal favourites. If Na Piarsaigh played Thomas's, I think Na Piarsaigh would win by a couple of points.
Yeah, I'm kind of on those lines too. But again, that'll be you writing off St. Thomas's again, as you love to do. Who would you put as next? I mean, Ballyhale have the pedigree. Schlockneil have a certain amount of pedigree at this time of the competition. Obviously, this is a new Loughrea team. Kilmacud haven't been to a Leinster final just yet. Mullins, to be fair, have been to a Leinster final. St. Finbarrs, they're only kind of fresh enough in terms of Cork victories. Portaferry, probably not so much. Dunloy, they've been doing really, really well in Antrim, but haven't got too far beyond that. So who would you be looking at for number 5?
Well, I think Schlockneil are favourites to win Ulster again. I definitely have them in the mix around 5. Tell you, I wouldn't have Ballyea too far down either. 5, 6 Ballyea. Yeah.
If Ballyea met Schlockneil tomorrow, who would you put down to win that game?
Oh, that's tough.
I'd be going with Ballyea.
That's tough.
Viewers, get your comments in. Let us know.
I would have Ballyea favourites to beat the Bars at the weekend, and I think they'll rattle whoever they play in the Munster final. Yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm happy enough with that. A part of it, Shane, as well is that like we haven't probably seen enough of Schlockneil. We've only really seen them, in those All Ireland semi-finals, and they were good against Ballygunner last year. But we don't have first-hand, visual, evidence of, whether they're better or worse this year maybe than they were last year. They're obviously out of football again, same as last year. So they'll fancy the chance of going on a run. But as we said, around the time of the Antrim County final, Dunloy are a quality side. Yeah. Dunloy will be, fancy the chances of causing what would be viewed as an upset probably outside of Ulster, but that's probably it's a 60-40 game in Schlockneil's favour. Like Dunloy are very, very close, and there's a quagmire of teams here, Shane, where there's very very, very small margins, and it's very subjective to who's ahead of who.
Yeah, I like that idea of a quagmire. That's
Glenn Quagmire.
So are you happy enough then with, like, we know that some team is going to do a screenshot of this and say we're writing them off, and obviously we are.
I hope they do it, Shane.
Come on, Thomas and Loughrea, I'm rooting for you. Have to say Schlockneil in 5, they've earned it at this stage. I think they'd beat any of the 4 teams outside the top 4. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. There's so many brilliant different items you can get there on the site. Also, if you want to keep an eye out on ourstore.ie, it's our store that we've launched there recently. Maybe you want to have this slick little Kerry-esque top. We've also got a few other beauties like this one that has that sort of Mayo vibe as well. You can see the sort of matrix design to the back of that. We've got so many other ones. Look at this Kilkenny one here. That's real retro stuff right there. So you can keep an eye out at that or on that at ourstore.ie. What are you smirking about?
No, I'm just trying to think. Even like it's the separation between these teams is so small. It's almost like it's, you know, we talked about that Champions League style, you know, potentially in the club outside of the county stuff. But
that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, it would be brilliant. But you're looking at the top 4. If they played each other, that'd be unreal. And I'd say if 5 to 13 played each other regularly, then, you know, there is a bit of a gap between the top 4 and the rest. But the gap between the rest is so small, if you get me. Like you draw Ballyea, Schlockneil, you know, Kilmacud, Mullins's, Finbars, Dunloy into the mix there. Like you're talking about, you know, as Paddy O'Shea used to say, a grain of rice will tip the scales. You know, there's no margin between, very, very little margin between any of them. I think realistically, I'd nearly start at the very bottom and nearly work our way back up, maybe even. And with due respect to them, I would have Portaferry down at the bottom, probably in 13th. They're playing, who are they playing? They're playing Schlockneil. Schlockneil are playing Dunloy, aren't they, this weekend? And the winners play Portaferry in the final. But I'd probably have them down at the bottom. As regards who's going to be 7th, Loughrea will definitely fancy their chances of.
By the way, it's Portaferry against Schlockneil, and the winner plays Dunloy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That makes it even more difficult, I would say, from a Portaferry point of view.
Surely you'd have to, like, I actually think it's not that I think that Portaferry are a better team than Naas, but I just think the chances of Portaferry winning against Schlockneil are slightly higher than Naas beating Ballyhale. So it's not that I necessarily think that Portaferry would beat Naas. I mean, we don't really get to see Portaferry matches, but I think that just the chances of Naas beating Ballyhale are so low that I would probably have them 11th here.
Yeah, okay. They're very, very minuscule odds. Like I think Castleingagham were 11-1 yesterday. I don't know what Naas would be. It'd probably be 8 or 9-1, I'd say, to beat Ballyhale. And it would take a monumental effort to get within 5 or 6, you'd imagine, of a Ballyhale side who are firing on all cylinders at the moment.
So for the 9th team, we've got a mini table of 5 teams left here. Now, who's going in next? Have I left us short? I haven't.
Yeah, Naas will have to be 13th and Portaferry will have to be 12th. And then we'll fill them in there. Whether we have enough room on the screen or not is another story.
Hey, I'll sort it. Don't you worry.
7th team. See, Mullins are seasoned enough at provincial level. Loughrea are in a county final, and the odds would suggest that they're going to be gone after this weekend. They obviously won't think that, and I do think they'll put it up to Thomas's. Kilmacud are in a semi-final. That's a 50-50 game, would you say, between Mullins and Crokes?
Big time.
Would you have Crokes as marginal favourites, though, if push came to shove and you had to?
Yeah, I think so. I think even like the way they got through last year and the way they were beaten by Clock and how they've responded this year, and even the scare that they had against Nafina late on, just that performance the other day showed a lot of composure and a team that probably believes it can adapt it better in the provincial championship. So are we agreed that Loughrea are going to have to be 11th here?
Realistically, Shane, they probably are. It's their first county final. Is it their first county final in a decade as well? They have.
Yeah.
Put the little star beside Loughrea, will you? That means that they can progress an awful lot. That's what they do, and I love it. There's potential for serious improvement there. I'd have Kilmacud at 7, Shane.
Yeah.
Mullins's Finbars. I'd probably have Kilmacud, Mullins's Finbars.
Yeah, it looks like we're on the same wavelength there. Keep the comments coming in. Is there any comments coming in there telling us what heats we are?
Cullen's Blood just says, "Come on, the Ulster clubs." So, like, I think Dunley are a fine side, I have to say, and I think they'll give Schlockneil plenty to think about when they play them more than likely. But they do have to still go and prove it. Porter just says Ballyhale have the greatest in TJ, and Cullen's Blood said TJ is a shrewd operator, but all good things come to an end. I think the great man's timing belt is starting to go. Whoa, big predictions there. It is a fine line between being at the top of your game and at his age. I think he's 35 later on this month as well. But I think Pat Hoban is smart, even giving him a break and refreshing him up a small bit as well. Another comment in here, Jay Kwan saying Sim Finbars have to be ahead of Mullins's Cork v Carlow. Yeah, first time champions in Cork for first time in a long time. Mullins has laid it down. I'll put it this way: would Finbars get as close to Ballyhale as Mullins did in the Leinster final a couple of years ago? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, look, I think I'm pretty happy with it. I'll bring it up just once more here, and people, whether you're watching the show live or later on, get your comments in and let us know. So we've got Ballyhale at number 1, Ballygunner, St Thomas's, Na Piarsaigh, Ballya, Schlockneil, Kilmacud, St Mullins, St Finbars, Dunloy, Loughrea with an asterisk, as in they'll improve in years to come, Portaferry and Naas. It's a pretty tasty lineup, and like we were saying, I'd love to see a Champions League style groups with those teams involved and see how they go. Like, I want to see Ballyhale, Ballygunner. I want to see Na Piarsaigh, Ballyhale, Na Piarsaigh, Ballygunner. I want to see Thomas's against the 3 of those teams, not to mention a few of the others as well. It is such a shame that we might never see some of these matchups ever just because of the quirks of the club calendar.
Well, I tell you what's a shame as well, Shane. Like, I want to see Ballyhale against Ballygunner, but I also want to see Ballyhale against Na Piarsaigh. And we only have the chance of seeing one of them this year, and we mightn't see any of them. Like, someone's going to win between Ballygunner and Na Piarsaigh at the weekend, and there'll be favourites to win the Munster final, but they're not necessarily guaranteed to get through. I just think we have an absolute game for the ages in store on Sunday. I just hope it lives up to even half the billing. And then for the reason that I want to see Ballyhale meeting Ballygunner again, I'd love to see them meeting in All-Ireland semi-final after everything that happened in February and the pain of that for Ballyhale and the joy of that for Ballygunner. And if Ballygunner play Ballyhale again, will that release valve from the All-Ireland final and getting over the line, will that be released? Will that see them be a more seasoned team in a big game like that? I think it's going to be fascinating, but there's some classic games to be played out over the next couple of months.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the. By the way, to be fair, let's get a comment in from Kieran Dowling, who's the manager of Kilmacud Crokes. He said, "We said it after last year losing the clock that it could be 7 years before we got back out in Leinster because it impedes your development. To get out again with the back-to-back is hugely important for us. We'll see. We'll keep on trying to develop and grow as the days and weeks go by. Back out to Bray on Tuesday night. It doesn't get better than this." So Leinster Intermediate. This was a fairly eye-popping result that Danesford at home to Trim, who are of course the Meath champions. Richie Hogan led Danesford with the likes of Paul Murphy, and there's a couple of other players who've really been stepping up in recent times. Were you surprised to see Danesford lose this game? And there was a video doing the rounds of Richie Hogan, a beautiful score on the spin. But I can't imagine too many people in Kilkenny were thinking that their intermediate champions would be taken down by the Meath senior champions.
By God, I was surprised, Shane. That was a fairly eye-popping result. There's no point in saying any different. 2 eye-popping results in the one competition. Were Danesford something like 1-20 to win this game? Obviously, Paddy Hogan in goals, Paul Murphy centre back, Richie Hogan controlling things up in the forward line. I believe he was lucky to escape a red at one stage, just with a kind of a loose hurl at one stage. But this is a massive upset. As you say, it's the Meath senior champions. Yeah, you could say that was one thing. It's their senior team coming up against the intermediate champions. But like, history would suggest that Kilkenny intermediate teams are, going to be favourites for the All-Ireland once they get out of their camp.
And they were senior last year.
Yeah. So like, this is a massive shock. And while we'll probably talk about the shock and, Danesford not getting up to the levels that are required, I think they might have lost a fella to Dubai since the county final. I might have had an injury or two, but they still would have been really expected to come through here. But probably need to give, no more than Nave Barrow in Dublin, we need to give Trim serious kudos here. Like, they turned it into, like, they didn't concede a goal, turned it into a bit of an arm wrestle, 16 points to 15. I believe James Torr was brilliant. I think Mickey Cole got a couple of points as well. There's a James Murray up top hitting the freeze as well. Huge result for them. Massive result. And look how open it is. Like we were talking about the potential All-Ireland champions in both Danesfort and Oulart. Both are gone now. So like Tullamore, Bray, Trim, opportunity absolutely knocking for those. And I've left out one team obviously as well, which we'll go into in a second. But like some opportunity for the teams remaining now.
Yeah, so as we already mentioned, Nape Rogue beat Oulart on penalties. Tullamore saw Father Daltons of Westmeath 117 to 10 points. So obviously had a fairly comfortable win for a finish there. And Bray Emirates beat St. Lazarians, Abbey Leaks 17 points to 16. So that one was as tight as a duck's bottom by the sounds of it as well. But Tullamore will surely be fancying a decent run here. And how far would Roscrea be from Tullamore? If they met in an All-Ireland semi-final or final, that could be tasty.
Yeah, it wouldn't be particularly far. It wouldn't be particularly far. It'd be 35 minutes, I'd say. Tullamore, obviously, were in a Leinster senior final in 2009, beaten by Ballyhale. And the fact that they're juggling football and hurling week on week, and a lot of the same players. Actually, probably not enough of the same players, because a lot of them would just focus on football, but they have all those guys kicking football now. And I believe Shane Dooley was on fire at the weekend as well. So, yeah, listen, they're probably favourites of what's remaining, I'd say. And it's funny, I remember making the comment, I didn't realise how it was going to work out, said that Bray would really fancy their chances going on their own in Leinster, and someone pointed to Oulart or the Kilkenny champions, and it's just mad to think that they're out. And, you know, teams will have to sense that there's an opportunity there, but not be like daunted by that as well. Do you know what I mean? Someone's going to step up now, and they're going to go on a great run and potentially go on and get to an All-Ireland semi-final or final as a result of this. But there's a couple of big steps to come first, but big opportunities for those remaining.
Traumspieler with an interesting point. What's gone wrong with Cork GA at all? Nemo beaten by Tipperary champs in football. Finbars need a win to boost Cork, so that's an interesting one. ML89 says, after winning 11 Leinster intermediates and the All-Ireland more years than not in that time too, not getting to a Leinster final even 2 years in a row is a big shock. That's obviously referring to the Kilkenny teams. Joe Butler, Trim put it up to Bennett's Bridge a few years back in the Leinster Intermediate Championship and could possibly have won that game also. Richard Hogan then a final point on Kilkenny. Kilkenny Intermediate is a bit of a dogfight, although in hindsight Thomastown might have been better suited to a Leinster campaign, deeper squad, and they've lost, isn't it, 3 intermediate finals in recent times. Leinster Junior Championship, St. Fecans of Louth, they beat St. Pat's Kilcoo 118 to 16. Blacks and Whites off Ringtown. Did that go to extra time? 220 to 17 anyway. I know it was tight for long spells. Commercials, Rackcool Commercials beat Mount Mellick 117 to 10, and then Horswood saw off Aero Curraquill 20 points to 13. So loads going on across the board there in the hurling club. Is there anything you want to say on those before we talk a small bit of football?
No, I'd say we've probably gone. We've probably gone OTT on the hurling this week, but so many different stories there, and it's two of the biggest upsets. We were talking about provincial upsets last week. Trim beating Danesfort, and Naomh Barrow beating Oulart was an even bigger surprise. I would have said, to be honest with you.
Yeah, actually,
go on.
Sorry, I just skipped there for a second, but we should talk about the Munster Camogie final, because what a win for Drum. They've been beaten by a point last year against Scariff Agonlow, but they got the victory here. And Pat Ryan was obviously delighted. He's the manager of Drum after the game, and he was talking about the difference that Casey O'Dwyer made when she came on. With 10 minutes to go, she came on and hit 3 points. This one's a minor, and what a difference maker. The game was level at 5 points apiece at half time. A glorious one for Drum and Inch, and I'm sure people saw the video of the dressing room afterwards. They were elated.
Yeah, no, class. It looked like deadly celebrations. Obviously, I think they won it in 2020, and Scariff Agunlow won it last year. They play either Schlockneil or Lockeel in the All-Ireland semi-final. So again, they've been going on an unbelievable run in recent years. Drum have, and yeah, like, I'm sure they'll be celebrating for the next couple of days at least. It's funny that Casey O'Dwyer are coming in as well. Like, I know. And I go into the Borough Camogie result in a minute. Like, Borough's squad would be, to be an absolute plethora of minors within there. Like, and it's funny. It's the Camogie is different than the men's game in that regard. Younger players are able to thrive and survive maybe a bit more at senior Camogie level, maybe than in hurling as well. Obviously, I don't think there's the same restrictions in place either as well around, you know, not being able to be a minor or having to be a certain age before you play senior. But just on a couple of the other big camogie results of the weekend, Clonmel from Kerry, I think they nearly had the 15 Kerry players on their club team a couple of years ago. They beat Bullock from Cork in the intermediate final 2-9 to 1-8. In the junior final, Adair beat Bricky Rangers 1-9 to 8 points. And the Leinster Senior Camogie finals, Oulart to Bala were too strong for my own bar. It was 8 to 6 points at half time, but Oulart to Bala pulled away in the second half, 5-16 to 1-7. They were obviously All Ireland club champions 2 years ago. This is the first time for Borough to ever compete at senior level. So Rhinus would have won back-to-back intermediates, and that earned the Offaly champions the right to go up to senior. And it will be Oulart to Bala against St. Vincent's in the Leinster Senior Camogie final. Taggy Fogarty is the main man with Vincent, and they beat his native county's side, Thomastown, 5-11 to 1-11. And just a quick one as well, in the Limerick Senior Camogie final, I know Niamh Mulcahy was absolutely on fire for a Han as they won. They got their hands on the county title there again in Limerick once again.
Yeah, Ace Sully 180. We had 10 minors on our panel this year. This is it's the Borough Camogie team he's over, so that's some goal. Naas got early goals and are very hard to beat in Newbridge. If the Ballyhale game was there, it could be closer. By the way, we didn't really talk too much about the specifics of the game between Naas and Shinrone. I mean, what a performance from Naas, winning 4-21 to 18. I mean, that's a serious beating. And, you know, just to point out who did the score, and Simon Lacey got a couple of points, James Burke got a goal, so did Kevin Ahern, Charlie Sheridan. Jack Sheridan scored 1-11, 1-1 of that from play. Cahill Downing with a couple of points also. Brilliant for Naas, of course, to get to a Leinster semi-final and, you know, first win at this level. I'm not actually sure when they last had a win at this level. Actually, it's the first ever win at this level, actually. I'm just seeing it there on a match report. But for Offaly Hurling and for Shinrone, I mean, is it possible that, you know, they had their county title win, first ever, unbelievable. Did they struggle to get back, you know, and fully focus for this game, or are we just focused on how good Naas were?
Bit of both, Shane. Naas are obviously a very good side. I thought this was a 50-50 game, I have to say. I know Shinrone are missing Kieran Cleary, who was man of the match in the county final. He's gone to Australia. But I still thought Shinrone would be 50-50, I have to say. And
it doesn't explain a 15-point loss, we'll put it that way, being down.
No, not at all, no. And while Naas are a very good side, they're a team that was coming up the ranks. Like, they were at intermediate level last year, and I know they've dominated Kildare, but like when you put it like Offaly versus Kildare, suppose maybe realistically I've ran away with myself a bit. They're obviously both competing at both competing at Joe McDonagh level in 2023, but I just thought it's probably not a great reflection on where Offaly club hurling is and where the county scene is at the moment, when you've maybe 4 or 5 Shinrone guys who are potentially backbone in the senior team next year under Johnny Kelly, as they have under Mick Fennelly, and they were, you know, comprehensively beaten. It's not, you know, and I know you can say they were going to Newbridge or whatever, but it's not a good result. Listen, it won't take the glass off their first ever county final, far from it, but it was a 6-week gap. It wasn't a 2-week gap. There's no real excuse with celebrations or anything like that. So I know from an Offaly head looking at it, you would be disappointed, because you want your teams to be competitive. You know, you want your teams, I'll put it this, Shane, you want your teams to be winning against the teams you expect to be winning against. You know what I mean? You're coming up against Ballyhale, you know, they're probably going to take a bit of a tanking, but you're thinking this is probably a winnable game, and then it's totally gotten away from them by the looks of things.
Yeah, Michael Barnes says, give it to him, Shane. It was all guff last week about the state of Tip Club hurling after the Killer One loss.
I don't think I was at all.
Luckily, I'm above that sort of nonsense that you did.
You're above very little. I don't think I actually defended Tipperary's honour last week.
You were slating Tip in general.
Well, listen, there's nothing new there. I don't know if I've ever said this story on air, but a couple of years ago, I walked into Brendan's Park. I'll have to change the language a small bit here. And a fella says to me, he says, "What do you make of that Stapleton lad?" And I was like, sure, he's all right. And he just said, "Some effing idiot, isn't he?" And he basically having to go because you were always kind of slating Offaly. But that was kind of the time when we were at the lowest of our low, and we were getting 3 or 4 lads sent off in most games. But listen, his opinion of you was probably correct.
He's probably on the money there. I wouldn't be too sensitive. What about the Munster Club Football Championship? Like, Tipperary obviously aren't alive in the Hurling Club Championship at the moment, but Clonmel Commercials, what a performance against Nemo Rangers. More or less nobody, there was hardly a sinner there from what I could see at Parky Queeve as I watched it on RT the other night, 2-15 to 111, and Nemo got a goal at the end just to take the bad look off it, if we're to be honest about it. But Sean O'Connor, 1-4, he's obviously established himself with the county in the last year or two. Jason Lonergan won man of the match. He got 5 points from play, 1 from a free. Coleman Kennedy won 1. Connell Kennedy 2. Pádraig Lurham, another county man, a point. Michael Quinlivan didn't even score, but he obviously had an impact as well. There's a lot to like about this Clonmel Commercials team, and that's before you talk about having Seamus Kennedy, a county hurler, in at full back, and Kevin Fahey, a county footballer, at centre back.
Just a quick one, Shane. This one wasn't a surprise, as big of a surprise. Like, was this a surprise to you? This was marginal. It was
a 50-50 game to me beforehand.
Yeah. But what a performance to deliver going down to Cork. They obviously beat them in the 16 finals we discussed. Nemo were a much better team when they met. I think it was 15-8, was it, when they met in 2019. But like, when was the last time you seen like as good, like, this was like total football from Clonmel the other night. It was an absolute joy to watch. I was down in Dingle, it was on the telly, we were watching bits and pieces of it, but anytime I saw it, it was just so free flowing, and it was just a really enjoyable game to watch from a point of view of, a side going out, and just, it wasn't obviously all attacking or anything, far from it, but I loved the way they played, I put it to you that way.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it kind of reminded me of Tipperary in the Munster final a few years ago against Cork when the title was lifted. It was that sort of a performance, just stirring stuff at times. The big problem now is, Jason Lonergan, who was brilliant. He's due to travel to USA, yesterday, I believe. That would be a massive loss ahead of the Newcastle West match in the Munster semi-final. Like, you take a fulcrum of the team out there, it's going to be difficult now. There's good depth as well. That's one thing I'd say for sure, because I saw Peter McGarry, who's a county under-20 hurler, coming on as a substitute in the second half. That's good. Aldo Matassa, I think he was a Tipperary minor. He came off the bench, and a couple of other guys as well. So it's obviously good that there's a bit of depth there, but you're still taking out a brilliant player in Jason Lonergan. So I don't know whether they can absorb. That's another thing.
Just on that, Shane, what do you do with Lonergan at the moment, right? So he probably can come home for a game or two, but like, what way do you do it? And this is not being disrespectful to future opponents, but do you try and wait for it potentially for it to be a Munster fight? Like, he's only just gone over, like, he can't be flying over and back, and he's doing a job, like, he's obviously probably has to be on hand. So what way do you balance that? Do you try and look into the future a bit and say, we want you for a Munster final if we're at that point, or what way do you do it? Or we want you for an All-Ireland semi-final if we're at that point, or what? Because they're definitely Munster favourites now. Heavy enough Munster favourites as well.
See, the problem is, it's not like he's in New York. He's in San Jose in California, which is the other side of the country altogether. So it makes it a very difficult trip, the guts of 10 or 11 hours. So that's really going to take it out of a person. So if he comes back for the Newcastle West game, and then assuming that Clonmel win that game, he has to come back a little while later, I think that's a huge, huge ask. So I think, like you're almost suggesting there, it maybe is best to just hedge the bets, hope that you have enough there to beat Newcastle West, and who knows how that game will go, and then see if you can have him right for the Munster final. That's probably the way I'd be looking at doing it. If he was willing himself, and his job allowed him to make it back for both games, absolutely brilliant. But if you had to pick one over the other, I think you'd nearly have to roll the dice, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I know. I think you would. It's funny. I don't know who he's going working with around like that, but like, if they don't understand GA, I'd say they think the ideas of him flying back for this amateur game is totally bonkers. I don't know whether they don't understand GA around like that. But like, if you ever talk to people who have no connection with the GA about like even the commitment involved, they don't get it. They don't understand like why Peter Cook would fly back from America to play with Mike Cullen or anything like that. He obviously wasn't around at the weekend. But it's a bit kind of bonkers, yeah. But I think I probably would be hedging my bet somewhat and saying, listen, if we can't beat Newcastle, and I don't know, geez, would come across as disrespectful, but if we can't get to the Munster final without you, then maybe we don't deserve to be there at all.
Yeah, Aero Guinness, they beat the Nair by 3-11 to 5 points. This was very comprehensive. Gavin Cooney had scored 6 points in the county final. The goal he got early on, the point he got early on in the game, beauty on the left foot from the sideline. Then he got a goal at the start of the second half. Then Mark McInerney, he added a goal. And then I think it was 47 seconds later. This was maybe like early enough in the second half. McInerney won. I think there was a quick turnover and a kick out. McInerney handed it to Cooney. He sold it past the man, side footed into the bottom corner. And for the Nair, it wasn't a great performance. They didn't have Conor Gleeson, who was out with a shoulder injury. But I'd say Éire Óg now, no more than Clonmel commercials, they'll be thinking, we'll have a right go at Cairns O'Reilly the next day out, and maybe we can get it ourselves into a Munster final.
Yeah, no, we kind of flagged it up on Thursday that there was a big opportunity for the winners of this game. The Nair were, like, given that they were without Conor Gleeson, had put themselves in a pretty good position. But as Richard Hogan said there earlier, like a couple of goals in a couple of minutes and the game just changed completely. And you'd have to say there were 3 preventable goals. There's probably 3 mistakes for the 3 goals and just completely turned the game. And like looking at it on paper, what was it? Was it 3 points to 2 at halftime, or was it 2-2 at halftime?
Yeah,
like
3-2.
You're looking at it at full time and it's 3-11 to 5 points. It's an absolute, like it looks like a hammering, but it was far from that. It was just 3 goals nearly consecutively. One was a blocked hand pass as they were coming out and Ennis walked it into the net. Another was a straight kick out. The first one was the fullback actually kind of turned and was running backwards facing his own goal, and the ball just went in over his head and it ended up in the net. But one of our viewers actually said a couple of weeks ago that Ennis, it's a funny one. They think Ennis have a better team in hurling, but that they think they have a better chance of winning Munster with the footballers, and that's the way it's obviously transpired because Ballyea beat them in the county final. But in the likes of Gavin Cooney, and is it Darren O'Neill midfield, the big tower midfielder?
Yeah, the monster.
Yeah, like a big, huge midfielder, like, and just mobile for his size as well. They'll fancy their chances of having a right good cut at Cairns O'Reilly's, and there'll probably be lads on to us seeing if we have the inside scoop about whether Jack Savage will be back or not, but I'm sure he'll be back.
Yeah, in the Munster Intermediate Football quarterfinals, Canturk of Cork beat Kildysart of Clare 3-11 to 6 points. Pretty routine win there. Alan Walsh with a brilliant early goal after a diagonal went into the square. Ian Walsh got the third one. Wasn't entirely sure who got the second one. Might have to check that up later. Na Piarsaigh, who are obviously the county hurling champions, their football team, and it's a completely different 15. They beat Rowan Moore of Waterford 2-10 to 1-5. So the Piarsaigh were wearing their Limerick jerseys for this because of a jersey clash with Rowan Moore. They both have light blue. I noticed that in the Piarsaigh were getting a lot of turnovers up high. Evan Sweeney lobbed the goalie to put daylight between the sides in the first half. Then he scored another one. Ballina of Tipperary up next. And the Piarsaigh and Ballina wouldn't be all that far away from each other geographically. Then in the junior quarterfinals in Munster, Castlemahon of Limerick beat Shamrocks of Waterford 118 to 212. Edward Lonergan got a goal early on for Shamrocks. Probably should have been stopped. And then Seamus Flanagan took over, obviously county hurler. But, you don't expect a county hurler to be kicking frees from the floor. He must have been out around the 45. He was hitting points from play, scored a brilliant goal at the start of the second half. I don't know, did you see it? But I think it was on a turnover, got away from the defence and probably about 10 yards out. Just
side foot to the top corner, like, yeah.
Oh, it was absolutely glorious. But Shamrocks, they were on top, but I think they ran out of steam. Got a bit of a last-minute goal to give them a lifeline. But next up for Flanagan and Castlemahon, Fossa and the Cliffords. That's going to be tasty.
Yeah,
and Paddy often plays centre-back, so you could have him up against Flanagan in a couple of exchanges.
Yeah, this was a funny game actually as well, Shane, because Castlemahon were under pressure early on and were kind of chasing the game. Then they ended up getting up a lot through Flanagan's exploits. I think he ended up at 1-5, and then they were kind of nearly just about surviving at the end. But I couldn't get over how natural he looked. But I remember chatting with Pa Ranahan before, doing a piece around Limerick football, and he was just talking about, the Limerick hurlers that would definitely be playing football with Limerick were it not for the hurling. And Flanagan was one of the top 2 or 3 up there with Garrod Hegarty, and he looks every bit of it. And while he's a big, strong physical force, it was his touch nearly as much as anything else. And as you say, you're not kicking frees off the ground unless you have played an awful lot of football and you're very, very comfortable with it. And he literally stroked over a free off the ground at one stage. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. We might as well will we chat about Fossa while we're on that topic?
Yeah.
Has there ever been a junior final within a county that had more focus on it than the Kerry junior final with Listry at last weekend? It was unbelievable.
There must have been somewhere along the line. Get your comments in there if you can think of as glamorous a junior final. But Mark O'Shea over one team, Eamon Fitzmaurice over the other team, and you're looking at a couple of the Cliffords playing there. I think there was a quote that came in. Who's this quote from now? Michael's gone running on me there. But yeah, it was Mark O'Shea, and he goes, Fossa were given, I think he was talking about how his team failed to hold on to a 4-point lead in the last 10 minutes of normal time, and that it was hard to keep, for 80 minutes, keep into David Clifford. And he goes, Fossa were given a lifeline, and when you're trying to curb the influence of probably one of the greatest players ever, it's a hard thing to do. 2-12, which is why he scored. Sure, that's frightening stuff. He just did what Jimmy McGee said, different class. That's what he is, really. It's great that he's from our county. We can appreciate him. But today, unfortunately, we were on the other end of it. So your thoughts on it?
Yeah, Asher, listen, the goal at the end, even, it's just so hard to mark a guy like that, as Mark says, over 80 minutes, because you can stop him at different stages, but he's going to get an awful lot of ball. Even Paddy Clifford raided forward to get on the end of a diagonal ball from Clifford at one stage and palmed it into the net. He obviously would have taken a chance because he'd be much further back the field than that. It's gas though, so they're gone up intermediate now, and Rathmore won the intermediate championship against Gaeltacht by a point. So East Kerry have been weakened severely as a result of that. So Paul Murphy and the Rathmore lads won't be able to play with East Kerry next year. And if Fossa do get up, it's funny, like if Fossa do end up senior, then he won't be playing with East Kerry either, because they'll be playing in the senior championship. So East Kerry might, in a couple of years, maybe might not be as strong as they are now. But David Clifford's unbelievable year keeps on going. Like, look at this.
And the commentary.
Yeah.
Listen.
Different class. Different class.
Brilliant. Just
whoever did that, that's magical stuff.
It lends itself perfect to it. And like he's had I know we had it up on the OurGame Twitter over the weekend. Like what he scored and the year he's had so far. Like, I put it to you this way. Here's one for you. As GA years go, like, who has had a better GA year? I know there's been, like Brian Fenton has had unbelievable years with Dublin. But Con would be up there now. But I'd say there's not too many more. Than Con won.
Henry Shefflin.
TJ Henry. Con won a Sigerson in the middle of one a year All-Ireland club runs, I think, didn't he? I think he did.
And then one with the Dublin footballers as well.
Yeah, like that's a fair year. Clifford's obviously won League, Munster, All-Ireland, beaten in the Sigerson final. If only he'd won that. Kerry Senior Football Championship, Kerry Junior Championship, and now the potential to go on a Munster and All-Ireland run in Kerry as well. What would you do with him if you're over a team at junior level? What would you just put two lads on him, or like what would you do?
I'd just pull the team out of the competition.
At least you're honest.
I don't know what else. Hey, Diarmuid Connolly's probably not too far away either. He probably had a few years there where he was winning All-Irelands with St. Vincent's and with Dublin, and probably being the main man in it as well.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah,
and like, probably
we'll have to
playing hurling with Vincent's as well.
We'll have to go through it. There's the one from ML89. Didn't Chad Fitzpatrick have some ridiculous year when he won every competition he entered, and young hurler and all-star? You could be right. I smell a piece coming anyway. That's all I know.
The other game in the Munster Junior Football Championship quarter-final, Thurles Sarsfields beat Liscannor of Clare. So Liscannor were leading for long spells, and I think Sars really pushed on late on, and Jack Fogarty his goal clinched it. Richard Hogan with a sneery comment. Are Sars concentrating on the football now, Shane? Big win for them in West Clare with the big ball. But I'll tell you what, it was a great performance, and Paddy Creedon, who I'm sure we'll be seeing with the Tipperary senior hurlers pretty soon, I would imagine that David Power, the senior football manager, wouldn't mind calling him in.
Did you see Fogarty's celebration after the goal? He was giving it
He was giving it to the defender, wasn't he?
Like, he was giving it the big one, and it wasn't the defender that he sidestepped to pass the ball into net. That wasn't who was giving it to. He was giving it to one of the other lads out the pitch who maybe had said something to him earlier on in the game. But I kind of, it definitely shows you, like, while Sars are obviously, hurling kind of true and true, they're obviously taking this seriously enough and are looking to kick on. When the opportunity arises, go for it.
Yeah, by the way, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe on all the different channels, and you won't miss anything if you turn on the notifications. The Kerry Intermediate final saw Rathmore beat on Gaeltacht 113-14, so they're back up to the top tier for next year. the Ulster football quarter-final, Glen against Ergal Kieran, that was some match. I mean, just brilliant scores on both sides. Conor Glass ended up with man of the match, but the Canavans were wowing us at times. And we didn't talk about this last week, with all the talk of Kilcoo and Jerome Johnson and, of course, Adrian O'Brien coaching both the Bars and Ballier. Malachy O'Rourke has won Tyrone County titles as a player and a manager with Ergal Kieran, but it was over the Glen team that beat them. And they're obviously in a final now of the Ulster Football Championship up against Kilcoo. And the interesting thing there is that we had both Conlon Gilligan, who's over Kilcoo, and Malachy O'Rourke, who's over Glen, at our coaching clinic in St. Gall's recently. But
they're not playing each other yet. They're not playing each other yet. They're playing each other potentially in the final. I think. I think the Glen have Carrigan, and Kilcoo have who's in the other semi-final?
Enniskillen Gales. Sorry, I jumped one step too far ahead. But they're still, I suppose, potentially on a collision course there. But yeah, we kind of missed out the fact that Malachy O'Rourke was up against the Tyrone men that he knows so well.
Yeah, no, we did. I kind of read it somewhere or saw it mentioned, but Jerome Johnson was the only story in town. And it's funny the way that just was a bit of a non-story, just because Kilcoo were just dominant from start to finish. And yeah, it's funny because Ballybay were so good against Crossmaglen, but Kilcoo have kind of weathered a couple of storms now and look like they've played themselves into form, if you get me. They were kind of surviving in some games, but they look like they're really fit to power on. They look like they're getting ready to peak in around the time of when they could be playing Glen. And it was interesting to hear Conor Glass's comments. I didn't see much of that game now, apart from, was it Dara Canavan's dummy, was it
Rory or Dara? It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, it was dummy solo. And the defender actually tweeted it, I think, last night, because he actually ended up like flying and his head hopped off the ground as well. It was just beautiful to see it. And I saw someone did a split screen of whether it was Dara or Rory, and a comparison with Peter doing it years ago at club level as well. But the acorn doesn't fall too far from the tree. But Conor Glass said in his comments after that,
the apple.
Yeah, the apple, the acorn or the apple, whichever. But Conor Glass was saying, like, he didn't shy away from the fact that they are mad to play Kilcoo. And they're mad for another crack at Kilcoo. Basically said one mistake cost us in that game last year, and they've been eyeing that one for a long time. And by all accounts, with due respect to Carrigan, who had a great win in Enniskillen Gales as well, it looks like that dream match in the Ulster final is going to be on the cards by all accounts.
And this time last year, I was talking up the Glen to win Ulster, but obviously that didn't come right. But this year, maybe it will happen. And obviously we've mentioned Carrigan there, so let's look at them coming back from the brink of defeat in the dying seconds. And it was both in normal time and extra time, but this was the end of normal time. 66 minutes, obviously only an hour in club games. Little quick short free, and this actually reminded me of the Tipperary Offaly minor final, the way he lofted it in there and the player was just able to fist it in.
It has been turned to the back of the net. The umpire signals the referee.
Fairly good going, wasn't it? The way they lofted that in.
Any excuse to bring up Tipperary Offaly for earlier on this year. In fairness, we managed to segue in like a Tipperary slag or an Offaly slag very well. I have to say it's almost seamless now at this stage. But that was beautifully done. I tell you what was good about it as well, Shane, is because everyone was expecting the ball to come in from the initial 45 and we're set up for that, and then the ball was coming in at a different angle all of a sudden and with a different float on it. Doesn't always work out, but it worked out on this occasion.
Yeah, fair play to them there. Carrigan eventually winning 4-1 on penalties after the game ended 2-13 apiece after extra time. Ballybay, just to confirm that score again, they lost 1-7 to 2-14 against Kilcoo. And Enniskillen Gales of Fermanagh against Gowna, that finished 1-17 to 2-14 after extra time. Enniskillen won 5-3 on penalties. Would you have predicted that before the start of the year, that 2 out of the 4 quarterfinals would end up with penalties?
Well, probably not, no. But to be fair, going back through, there's been some amount of penalties in Ulster this year. Definitely, like
even in Down.
Yeah,
Down alone.
Down didn't Scotsdown survive penalties along the way? And Monaghan before been beaten in the county final as well. It seems to ring a bell. I don't know. In a lot of the counties in Ulster, it just seems, and even at provincial level now, the margins seem to be so fine. You'd have to say, and I mentioned it on Thursday's show, like Carrigan and Enniskillen Gales has definitely pushed through that door. But what they're awaiting the next day is, a step up on anything they've played yet this year.
Yeah, ML89 says Kilcoo plays some awful football, but it works. No one seems to play well against them. Even the greatest club team to play football in Carfin struggle to shake them off in Croke Park. The Ulster Intermediate quarterfinals, Glenullen of Derry were beaten heavily enough by Galbally Pierces of Tyrone 7-12 to 1-11. Cardiff of Monaghan saw Savile of Down 2-10-5. Dunlow of Donegal 1-11, Dunloicu Cullens 7 points. I actually wonder is there many of the hurlers who were playing that. I'm not actually entirely sure. And Castlerahan of Cavan beat St Mary's Devonish of Fermanagh 13 points to 10. Then the Connacht football semi-final, which is Westport took a bit of a shellacking here against Mike Cullen, 3-18 to 112. Did you expect it to be quite that much? I think generally the reports I'm seeing is that it didn't even flatter Mike Cullen, who were without Peter Cook.
Yeah, no, I didn't, Shane, at all. Desi Keneally was on fire by all accounts. I think he kicked 10 points. I thought this would be tight enough. Like, you go back through the history of the Mayo Championship. Obviously, Castlebar, a really good side. Crossmalina even back in the day as well. Who was it? Was it last year as well? Pierce's beat Kevin McLaughlin's club, which is Knockmore. Like, they're very, very good side. Like, I was expecting Westport. But obviously, I'll put it this way: someone said Robert Cribben, actually, the Kilkenny people, said it to me about a theory about first-time champions and how they just generally don't seem to back it up. And then you look at Shinrone in Offaly, you look at Westport. And neither of them backed it up at all. So you'd have to say very, very disappointing from the two of them. Mike Cullen made a serious statement, though, you'd have to say. They obviously are winning a Galway championship with the likes of Corofin and a few more big hitters in it. So definitely it looked like at the weekend they put themselves probably into the All-Ireland mix, you'd say, and put themselves seriously in the conversation in around the Glen and in around Crokes and in around Kilcoo. Probably just outside of that tree, but they definitely put themselves into the conversation.
Yeah, certainly Westport seemed a bit off it, whether it was, refocusing after such a huge, brilliant win not so long ago, whether it was the wides they had early in the second half. But they did have a lot of players who went down with injuries and cramps, so that would make you wonder where they were at coming into this game. Or maybe it was just the pace of Mike Cullen. You'd have to give them a fair bit of credit for that. But Desi Keneally, the two Kelly brothers, Owen Gallagher, Michael Riley, they were all very impressive for the winners. Sean Kelly was brilliant coming forward and breaking tackles, and wonder would he be playing further up the pitch for Galway next year, or they keep him where he is. And so next up for Mike Cullen is Strokestown in Tuam Stadium on Sunday. Probably feels like it's their title to lose, and I wonder if they've Peter Cook back. He'd be a Croke Park player for sure, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Shane, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I think he can't keep flying over and back from where he is. So I'd say they've maybe picked and choose their battles there and have done something like what I said with Jason Lonergan there. Like, we'll have you back for this game if we're still there, and if we're not there, hands up, mea culpa. We weren't good enough to get there. But I think you can't just keep playing back every weekend. Like, it's mad, and it kind of gets you even thinking about when Johnny Glynn was doing it when he was with Galway. It's a unique scenario, you'd have to say.
Yeah, and the intermediate football quarterfinal in Connacht, Dunmore McHale's of Galway beat St Malaise Gaels in Sligo 110-8. In the quarterfinal of the junior, Clifton of Galway saw off Carrigallen of Leitrim, and the junior semi-final, St Ronan's of Roscommon had a little bit too much for Owenmore Gaels, was 112 to 9 points. And then Sean Kavanagh coming out of retirement in the Tyrone Football Championship, a promotion relegation clash. That was quite something. Darren McCurry, he was on fire for Eden Dork as they regained their senior status on Saturday. He scored 13 points for St. Malachy's, edging out Moy by 21 points to 20 after extra time. Very, very dramatic promotion relegation game in Dunamore. So as I said, Eden Dork, they're back up after just one season outside the top flight. Sean Kavanagh come out of retirement. I mean, that's quite something to be coming out of retirement. I think he's 39 as well, so I'm not sure how long he had away from it, but they obviously wanted to put absolutely everything into it. But yeah, they're gone down.
Yeah, I saw a picture earlier on this year of the My Squad, and he wasn't on it, and I kind of, because when you see, the club tweeting or whatever, you immediately look for probably him and Colm, and I saw that he wasn't in it. But like, again, it's probably someone saying to him, we need you or whatever. You're never really retired unless you're injured or whatever, you're never really retired in that scenario. But sound like the Dazzler definitely dazzled anyway. 13 points. Like on his day, Shane, he is unmarkable. Like, and I know, he's predominantly going to go on the left the whole time, but it's still so hard to stop a lot of the time. And that's a big game because I know they treat the league unbelievably serious up there. So it's a huge win for Eden Dark.
Yeah, so in the Connacht ladies football final, Kilkerran Clonberne saw off Burrashul of Mayo 115-5, and they're going to play Ballymacarbery next. Hopefully we'll get Michael Ryan on the show soon. Obviously the man who has a cup named after him down in the Munster ladies competition. The Ulster football final, Donaghmine 111-17 for Moneyglass. So the winners, Donaghmine they're going to play Kilmacud next. There's one final thing which we always do on a Monday. And obviously, we never have a full think about it until this part of the show comes on us. Who is the GOAT of the week?
I'm actually going to give my GOAT of the week to a losing player over the weekend, and that's Jack Gallagher from Castletown Gagan. Ended up with 5 points against what was voted today as the best team in the country. His team were beaten by 25 points, and he had 5 points and was absolutely outstanding. So I'm going to give it to Jack Gallagher of Castletown Gagan.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Casey O'Dwyer of Drumlinch just for coming in and getting 3 points in the last 10 minutes as a minor. I think that was brilliant from her. In the football side of things, Gavin Cooney, I'm not sure exactly what he finished up with, but 2-something for Aero. We thought he was excellent.
You're usually looking for any excuse to give it to someone from Tipperary, as you did in the Camogie or the Hurling side. So I'd give it to Jason Lonergan because he was outstanding for Clonmel.
Yeah, so that's it for the show here. As ever, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off. Also, keep an eye out for the store that we have, ourstore.ie. And we also have one more for the year coaching clinic coming up. It's going to be UCD, the 3rd of December, 12 o'clock. We have Ger Brennan and Paul Galvin signed up for that. We're going to add one more name, but that's what we have so far, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant. So, Michael, as ever, thanks very much, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Cheers, Shano.